This 6-year-old took the life of his classmate because she rejected him. 6-year-old Dedrick Owens lived in Mount Morris Township, Michigan, which was about an hour away from the state's capital. He wasn't born into the best family as his father was in jail, but on the other hand, his mother was there and tried to support him and his brother as much as she could. She worked 2 jobs, but it wasn't enough and they got evicted. Dedrick ended up living in a crack house with his uncle, and this soon would affect his behavior. At 6 years old, his behavior was really bad. He would swear, flip people off, pinch, and hit other kids. His behavior got so bad that he had even stabbed a girl with a pencil in his school. On February 29th of 2000, Dedrick got into a fight with another male classmate. It escalated so quickly that he had even threatened to shoot the boy. No one knew that Dedrick had found a gun at his uncle's house and brought it with him to school along with a knife. He decided not to use it yet because he had plans on using it on 6-year-old Kayla Rowland. Just the day before, Dedrick tried to kiss Kayla, but she pushed him away and rejected him, which made him really mad and he wanted revenge. Once it was time to change classes, Dedrick walked up to Kayla and said, "I don't like you," and shot her once in the arm. The bullet entered her right arm and hit a vital artery, which caused her to suffer from a cardiac arrest, and she was pronounced dead. Dedrick had threw the gun in the trash before running to a nearby bathroom, but eventually was cornered by teachers and law enforcement. Once he was in police custody, he explained what he had done and showed no remorse. Because of Dedrick's age, he was not charged with murder, but was instead expelled for 90 days and was placed into foster care. His uncle ended up being arrested and sentenced up to 15 years for involuntary manslaughter.
Your son went missing at a carnival, but your story keeps changing. This is one of the most twisty-turny cases I've ever covered on the pod. So picture the scene. It's 1991 in New Jersey at a carnival, and a 5-year-old boy just totally vanishes. He's just suddenly gone without a trace. It's so disturbing. Everybody's super suspicious of the mum right off the bat because it feels like her story doesn't make sense, and she is getting absolutely hounded by the press and by the public. And she ends up saying publicly, "Do not judge me for the fact that I'm not going on TV crying. That's just not the way that I deal with things." Months and months go on with absolutely no sign of this little boy, and the mum actually ends up moving house because of how much she's hounded at her current property. Some people are suspicious of the dad. Some people are like, well, did the dad have something to do with it? And so the police look into him too. Then heartbreakingly, we find a body in this case, and then a random mysterious exotic dancer enters the mix that was apparently at this carnival. But before the police can work out what the hell this exotic dancer has got to do with anything, there's another disappearance, but this time it's the mum and she's been kidnapped. All I'm saying is you're gonna need to buckle up for this episode if you need company while you're cleaning the house or if you've got a long commute. Lock into this podcast episode because I'm absolutely exhausted.
Her mom performed an exorcism on her because she believed that she was possessed. 3-year-old Aurelie Proctor lived with her 25-year-old mom, Claudia Hernandez, in San Jose, California. Claudia believed that Aurelie was possessed because she would wake up in the middle of the night screaming and crying. Aurelie wouldn't stop, so this made Claudia believe that she was possessed somehow. On September 24th of 2021, around 6:30 a.m., Claudia and her brother drove Aurelie to a nearby church to help with her alleged possession. Claudia grabs Aurelie by the neck and the waist, trying to get her to throw up this evil spirit. Claudia's dad was the pastor of that church, and he ends up showing up to help them out. Claudia then puts her fingers down Aurelie's throat, and she ends up throwing up a clear/purple liquid. All of this went on for 12 hours, and just the day before, Aurelie was only given 6 ounces of water. Aurelie ended up passing away between 6 to 6:30 p.m. Once it was after 8 p.m., Claudia called 911 to report that her daughter had passed away. Once first responders arrived, they noticed that Aurelie had bruising around her eye, neck, and chest. At the time, no one was arrested because there wasn't enough evidence. A few days later, Claudia set up a GoFundMe to raise money for her daughter's burial. On January 27th of 2022, Claudia uploaded a YouTube video addressing the whole situation. She was not remorseful and basically said it is what it is. On January 31st, law enforcement were finally able to arrest and book Claudia into the Santa Clara County Jail because of that YouTube video, and on May 13th, her father and brother were arrested as well.
This might be one of the most controversial cases out there, and actually the case that inspired the character Eddie from Stranger Things. Yep, today we're diving into the West Memphis 3 case. On May 6, 1993, the bodies of 3 8-year-old boys were found in the woods. The 3 boys, Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers, were Cub Scouts and best friends and were found in a muddy creek brutally unalived. Due to the graphic nature of the crime, rumors started to spread that this was ritualistic, and that the one responsible was local teen Damien Eccles, who had a dark aesthetic, liked metal music, and was overall just seen as a pretty weird dude. Because it was very unlikely that this case was committed by only one person, they started suspecting Damien's friends, Jason and Jesse, as well. There was zero evidence or DNA that linked any of the three boys to the crime. Actually, the only thing that linked any of them was that one of them confessed. Jesse confessed while being interrogated by police in what many people believe was a coerced confession. Jesse had a very low IQ, changed his story many times, and his story didn't even match the details of the actual crime. Jesse even had a strong alibi at the time of the crime and even went on to recant his confession, saying that he was confused about what was going on. Jesse and Jason were actually sentenced to life in prison and Damien sentenced to death, even though there was no evidence that proved that they were involved at all. Following this, the three men actually had a lot of public support. There was movies made and some celebrities came out in support of them, and a lot of people actually believed that they were innocent and wrongly convicted. And they each tried to appeal their convictions over and over again for years, but were denied each time. Until it was discovered that the police were sitting on DNA evidence that could exonerate all of them. Turns out there was DNA found at the crime scene and it did not match any of the West Memphis 3. Actually, it matched one of the victims' fathers. So comment for part 2.
Why is nobody talking about what's going on in Alabama and how bodies of prisoners have been returned to their families with their organs missing? 2 families have now come forward claiming that their loved ones who died while incarcerated in Alabama prisons have had missing organs, and it's left many wondering what's truly going on. This was brought to light when 43-year-old Brandon Clay Dotson was found dead in his cell at Ventress Correctional Facility in Barber County on November 16, 2023. His death was already deemed mysterious to his family because it came on the same day that he was supposed to be considered for parole. His family then spent 5 days trying to claim his body, and when it was finally returned to them, Brandon was severely decomposed and he had bruising on the back of his neck, and his head was also extremely swollen. Based on the condition of his body, his family suspected that foul play might be involved, but they never received a death certificate from the Alabama Department of Corrections. So this prompted them to hire pathologists to conduct a second autopsy, and from those findings, they discovered that Brandon's heart was missing from his chest cavity. This was obviously very alarming to them because they were never notified or given a reason as to why his heart was missing. When reaching out to the ADOC to find out where his heart was, they stated that it was possibly given to the University of Alabama at Birmingham for research purposes. But when the family reached out to the university, they said that they never did an autopsy on Brandon and never received any of his organs. This prompted Brandon's family to file a lawsuit against the ADOC, mainly because they wanted to figure out where his heart was. But even today, it remains missing and unaccounted for. But because of this lawsuit, another family came forward and stated that the same thing happened to them. This time it was the family of 74-year-old Charles Edward Singleton, who died on November 2nd, 2021 at the Hamilton Aged and Infirmed. When his body was finally returned to his family, the funeral director told them that it would be really hard to prepare his body for viewing because of how decomposed Charles was with advanced skin slippage. And when asked why he was in such bad shape, the director told them that he was brought in missing all of his internal organs, including his brain. This came as an absolute shock to the family, just like in Brandon's case, because they were never notified or given a reason as to why this occurred. According to the family, the funeral director told them that normally organs are put in a bag and then placed back in the body after an autopsy, but his body had none. Charles's family were reportedly told that the UAB's Department of Pathology performed the autopsy and likely had his organs. But when they reached out to them, they were also told that they didn't have them and had never received them at all. So both men's organs were taken without consent and are still missing to this day. This has shed light on a disturbing pattern that has happened to many families in Alabama. Although just 2 have been identified because of the lawsuit, a funeral director in the area has stated that there were at least 5 other cases where they received bodies in a similar manner and in such horrible conditions. From the stench being so bad that loved ones couldn't have an open casket, to an incident where a prisoner's scalp had been pulled all the way back and not properly put back in place. The lawsuit against the ADOC is alleging that the organs of these deceased prisoners have been removed for improper purposes and to essentially be experimented on, and that the department is illegally taking organs from prisoners without notifying their family. A list of all organs that have been removed from prisoners that have died in the state's correctional facilities since 2013 has been requested to further investigate. But this has left many families who have had loved ones die questioning whether or not they were murdered, and they want to know what's truly going on in Alabama.
This is who I think was actually responsible in the infamous West Memphis 3 case. This is actually the case that inspired a lot of Stranger Things. When we left off in part 1, the West Memphis 3 were convicted of unaliving 3 8-year-old boys even though there was no evidence that actually linked them to the crime. After years of denied appeals, it was uncovered in 2007 that the police were sitting on DNA evidence, hairs that were found on the victims' bodies and around the crime scene that did not match any of the West Memphis 3 boys. And this frustrates me so much because you have Damien sitting on death row while there's someone else's DNA on the victims' bodies. And the hair found on the victim's body matched one of the victims, Stevie Branch's stepfather, Terry Hobbs. And hair found around the crime scene matched one of Terry's friends, David Jacoby, who Terry said he was with the night the 3 boys disappeared. This is so weird, but while everyone else was searching for the 3 missing little boys before their bodies were discovered, Terry and David were just hanging around playing guitar. Terry was the last person seen with the 3 boys. He had a violent history and was accused of SAing his stepchildren, so he's looking like a pretty good suspect. But the state didn't want to convict Terry because if they did, they would be admitting that they wrongly convicted the West Memphis 3. So the state came up with a solution where they wouldn't have to admit any wrongdoing by offering the West Memphis 3 boys released from prison if they agreed to an Alford plea. An Alford plea is a super rare thing where they can plead guilty while still maintaining their innocence at the same time. But this also means that the 3 would receive no compensation for being wrongfully convicted. But they were released after 18 years behind bars, 4 years after the DNA evidence that should have exonerated them was uncovered. And to this day, Terry has never been looked into as a person of interest, and requests for more DNA testing has been denied many times as recently as 2022. Actually terrifying how corrupt the justice system really is, but the saddest part of this entire case is Stevie, Michael, and Chris never received justice. Let me know all your thoughts, theories, questions, and case suggestions in the comments.
This is Rachel Morin. She was murdered 6 months ago while running alone on a popular hiking trail. Her murder is still unsolved, but police just released these new sketches of her killer. Everyone needs to know her story because this person could very well strike again. On August 5th of last year, Rachel left her home to go on a run at the Ma and Pa Heritage Trail in Bel Air, Maryland. It was a trail that she was known to hike, but that night she never returned home. Her boyfriend ended up reporting her missing at around 11:20 that night after not being able to contact her, and within hours, her car was found parked at the trailhead. The next day, someone searching for Rachel called 911 to report a body that was found near the Ma and Pa Trail, and when authorities arrived, they confirmed that it was Rachel. Not a lot of detail has been released about her cause of death, but police did say that it was clear that she'd been a victim of a violent homicide, and they suspected that she was attacked on the trail and then pulled through a wooded area before being killed in a drainage culvert. Authorities combed through hours of video footage from in and around the trail in hopes of quickly finding her killer, but they came up empty-handed. Then the focus turned to her boyfriend, who does have a criminal history, and he was kind of thrusted into the spotlight. But what the public didn't know was that authorities were able to pull DNA from the crime scene, where they were then able to run it through a national database. And not only did it not match Rachel's boyfriend, it actually matched and was linked back to a man who assaulted a young girl in Los Angeles during a home invasion on March 26th. Although the link did not provide the killer's name, investigators were able to review the home invasion and found that the man responsible for both crimes was actually caught on the home's security footage. The man entered the LA home possibly through a window and assaulted many members of the family, including a young girl, and he was eventually scared off. He was then seen leaving the home through the front door on security footage. Police believe that had he not been scared off by another family member, that this case would have likely ended similar to Rachel's. DNA left behind on a hat at the California home was confirmed to match DNA that was left behind in Rachel's murder. And with the help of witnesses on the trail that night, as well as the family members of the home invasion, police were able to put together this new sketch of Rachel's killer. He's believed to be around 5'9", between 20 to 30 years old, roughly 160 pounds, and has dark hair. Authorities are concerned that whoever did this could possibly be a serial killer who was escalating and could possibly kill again. At this point, it's not clear if Rachel was targeted, as she did frequent the trail, or if her killer just randomly stumbled across her that night. But one thing police do know is that the killer was likely very familiar with the area, and they believe that he'd been in the area for possibly even weeks leading up to the murder. Sheriff Jeff Gaylor said that his gut tells him that Rachel was stalked, but he also said that they can't rule out the possibility that this was a crime of opportunity. It's now been 6 months, and Rachel's murder is still unsolved. Ma and Pa Heritage Trail is somewhat popular and it starts behind some businesses that are always pretty busy, including a brewery and a Domino's Pizza. It's also entangled in a neighborhood, so this area is never that desolate. Someone has to know something. Right now, there's a $35,000 reward for information leading to an arrest. If you have any information about the murder of Rachel Morin, please contact the email on the screen.
It really is another level of evil. This babysitter tortured, starved, beat, and mutilated a 16-year-old girl because she was jealous of her. Sylvia was 16 years old when her parents left her and her younger sister Jenny to be taken care of by Gertrude for weekly payments while they were traveling for work. Gertrude had 7 children, so they were like, okay, what's not to trust? So it's been about a week now and it's payday, so Gertrude is waiting for the money from Sylvia's parents, but it showed up later than expected. Gertrude was so angry, she took a leather belt and a paddle, grabbed the girls, dragged them upstairs, and beat them so horribly while screaming, I took care of you two bitches a whole week for nothing. Paula had accused Jenny and Sylvia of eating too much food at a church supper after literally being starved for the past month, but that made Gertrude so mad that she beat Jenny and Sylvia over 15 times with the same paddle I mentioned before. Jenny ended up being more favored over Sylvia, I don't know why, so that led to less beatings and less starvation for Jenny. She noticed that her sister Sylvia was literally starving, so she snuck her a sandwich, but Gertrude's daughter Marie snitched. Gertrude and Paula literally grabbed Sylvia by the throat, choked her unconscious, beat her with this object right here, and put her in a bathtub with boiling hot water that literally caused her second-degree burns and blisters. It was so painful for Sylvia that she would pass out, and whenever she did, Gertrude would grab her by the hair and start banging her on the bathtub wall so she could wake up. A man who lives down the street saw the injuries and the open sores and blisters on Sylvia's body, so he caused the school to open up an investigation of child abuse, and when they pulled up to the front door and asked Gertrude about all of her injuries, she literally said she ran away last week, she has poor hygiene right now, so, she's a little bit messed up. And then they never questioned her again. To really look closely, it looks like Gertrude could be Sylvia's mom, and because of that, we believe that a lot of the abuse stemmed from the fact that Sylvia was so young and beautiful, comparing it to Gertrude, who was wrinkly, ugly, and evil. Paula and her sister Stephanie would constantly bring friends over and participate in torturing Sylvia with Gertrude there. They would take turns cutting her body up with a knife, burning her with cigarettes over 100 times, and even worse, force her to strip down in the middle of their family living room and herself with a Coca-Cola glass bottle. Gertrude would lock her in a room, deprive her of using the bathroom, and because of how weak and injured she was, Sylvia could not control her bladder and she would poop and pee herself. Even though this was a result of Gertrude's abuse towards Sylvia, she would still get mad at her and then continuously starve and deprive her of water. Gertrude would literally make up lies and tell her kids, oh, Sylvia's over here talking bad about you, and make them go downstairs and beat Sylvia up. The neighborhood kids would pay Gertrude 5 cents to go down to the basement where she would show off Sylvia's underdressed, malnourished body, beat her with a knife, and burn her with fire. And if that is not already horrible, they would pick Sylvia up, bring her upstairs into a boiling hot tub, and rub salt all over those wounds that they just inflicted on her. There is truly something evil in that woman. And there was another occasion where she forced Sylvia to strip down, and she engraved the words, I am a prophet and I am proud of it, with a burning hot needle into her belly. Imagine the pain of a burning hot needle piercing your abdomen right now. And then she would taunt her, saying how nobody would ever love you or marry you now. Later that night, she told her sister Jenny, I'm going to die and I can feel it. That breaks my heart. She told her sister that. To add to this already horrible situation, Gertrude and her son took her baby's diaper filled with poop and urine and forced it into her mouth. This girl was crying out for help. There was another instance where Sylvia had stolen some gym clothes because this woman would not get her anything. The result of that was Gertrude taking a 3-inch wide police belt, beating her, and then kicking her in her private area so badly and scolding her for the evils of premarital sex. I don't even know where that came from. Gertrude's other daughter Stephanie would yell out she didn't do anything, trying to defend her, but then she got mad at that and she would then burn Sylvia's tips of her fingers with a lighter. You're probably wondering, okay, where are Sylvia's parents and all of this? So within the 3 months that Sylvia and Jenny were at Gertrude's house, they only visited maybe like 2 or 3 times, but every time they did, Sylvia's injuries would be almost healed or Gertrude would make up an excuse as to why she has them. The worst part is Gertrude literally never left Sylvia and Jenny's side with her parents, so they had no way of telling them with her breathing behind their ear. After they would leave though, Gertrude would grab Sylvia's face and be like, oh, they're gone now. What are you going to do about it? The last 2 days days before Sylvia's death was literally a combined hell of the 3 months that she stayed at Gertrude's house. After being locked up in the basement for a couple of weeks, Sylvia had overheard Gertrude and her son upstairs talking about how they're going to abandon Sylvia to die there. So she tried to escape from the basement, but due to the severity of how bad her injuries were, Gertrude was able to catch her before she even left the door, and then she forced her to eat some crackers that she couldn't even swallow because of how dehydrated she was. I guess Gertrude got so mad at Sylvia for literally being on her deathbed that she grabbed a curtain rod, beat her so hard that it literally bent 90 degrees. And then she passed the curtain rod to Stephanie's boyfriend when he beat her one last time, and Sylvia ended up passing out. They picked Sylvia up, they dragged her back into the basement, and she was screaming for her life so loudly. A neighbor heard, but he ignored and never called 911. By the morning of October 26, Sylvia was barely able to speak, let alone move. Gertrude tried feeding her a donut and a glass of milk, but when she bit into the donut, her teeth were so fragile and weak that when she bit it, it literally loosened her teeth up. Her body was so zombified that picking up the glass milk was not even a possibility. Gertrude told Stephanie clean her up, so they took a garden hose and sprayed her down. Sylvia was literally crawling to the basement stairs, just trying to escape. Gertrude grabbed her by the ankles, pulled her, and then stomped on her head, stomped on it repeatedly. They picked Sylvia up, they put her onto a spoiled mattress, and there she muffled how badly she wished that her dad would just come and take her home. Those were her last words. Stephanie had noticed that Sylvia was no longer breathing, so she started mouth to mouth. But then Gertrude took Stephanie, yanked her off, grabbed a book, and beat Sylvia's already dead body, screaming, "Faker, faker, faker," because she was thinking that she was faking her death. Sylvia Lincoln was only 16 years old when she was severely tormented, starved, beat. The list can go on. For a number of 3 months before she lost her life and was ever able to grow up. I see a lot of mothers and fathers in my videos, and one thing I have to say is I wish all parents were like the parents that are in my comments. Me personally, when I become a mother, you are not going to see my child in the hands of no stranger, because things like this is what happens. Please protect your children and be safe out there.
This woman murdered both of her daughters in a sick act of revenge against her ex-husband. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Davina and Jasmine Kumari Baker. On the evening of the 12th of June 2007, 16-year-old Davina and 13-year-old Jasmine were winding down after a long day spent shopping with their mother, Rika Kumari. They had been to the Lakeside Centre in Essex, where Davina had bought herself some new clothes and new shoes, ready to start her new job at Pizza Hut, which she was really excited for. Davina actually lived with her dad David, however on this night Rika had convinced her to sleep over with the promise of another full day of shopping ahead of them tomorrow. Their relationship was a bit strained after Davina had moved out the year prior to live with her father David, and to say that David and Rika had a strained relationship would be an understatement. They had been divorced for about 3 or 4 years at this point, and at first Rika did struggle. However, her sadness soon turned into resentment. She envied everything that David done. David was a successful businessman and Rika would struggle to hold down jobs. At the time of this case, she had recently been sacked from a job she was working inside of a hotel. He had recently gotten into a new relationship which was going well, and Rika's new relationship with a man named Jeff had run its course and she just couldn't seem to let him go. This resentment and hatred and jealousy towards David motivated Rika to commit the most evil act of revenge. She had used the promise of a shopping trip to lure and convince Davina to stay over at her house at number 2 The Crofters, which is in Streatham. At around 2:30 a.m, now the 13th of June 2007, Rika snuck into her kitchen and retrieved a knife that she had purchased from Asda only 2 days prior, specifically for this reason. She creeped upstairs and entered into her oldest daughter's bedroom, and in a frenzy began to ferociously stab her 16-year-old daughter Davina over 39 times. Davina did awake in a panic and in vain tried to fight off her sadistic mother. Rika then made her way over to 13-year-old Jasmine's bedroom, where she would sustain a total of 29 stab wounds. After sadistically slaughtering both of her daughters, Rika would take 2 separate trips out in the car before calling up a friend and telling them, quote, "I have done something terrible." This friend would go on to contact the police. Officers arrived at 2 the Crofters at around 8 a.m. and here they found the body of Davina lay on her bedroom floor and the body of Jasmine lay in her bed. Both young girls were sadly deceased. Alongside the girls, they also found a written confession from Rika, which read, quote, "Sorry doesn't mean anything now. I killed my 2 beautiful daughters. I don't want them to get hurt like I did. Jeff hurt me so much I cannot explain. He found it difficult to compromise at times, but I loved him so much. My kids will not be a burden to anyone anymore." She was quickly arrested and would tell an officer, quote, "I have killed the kids. The children are dead. I stabbed them with the knives from the kitchen. This is terrible. At least the children are safe now. Nobody else can hurt them." Rika's trial began at Cambridgeshire Crown Court, where she tried to enter a plea of manslaughter on the grounds of abnormality of the mind, stating that she was depressed. This was very quickly refuted when a psychiatrist examined Rika and said that she wasn't clinically depressed and that she was likely suffering from mild depressive disorder, but that she was in full control of her actions and that she was sound of mind. During the trial, evidence came to light that the family had been under social services for a time. This came after worrying reports from Davina's school. The staff there would describe Rika as, quote, "volatile, excitable, erratic, frequently showed strange mood swings and could become aggressive." There was also a report that Rika had wished Davina dead in front of her teachers. At the trial, it was determined that the motivation for the murder did stem from Rika's jealousy of David. She knew that the best way to hurt him, to really hurt him, was to rip away the 2 most important girls in his life. At the end of the trial, Rika Kumari would be found guilty of the double murder of her daughters, Davina and Jasmine Kumari Baker. She would be sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 33 years to serve, which means that she won't be considered for parole until she is in her 70s. The murders of his precious daughters broke David. He had an amazingly close bond with them. He would recall happy memories, singing with them, specifically songs from the film Grease. He would take them out shopping, spoiling them rotten. They always had a laugh together. He would say that his girl's sense of humour was sharp. Davina was 16 years old when she was murdered by her mother. She was described as funny and outgoing and an extrovert. She was on the pathway to her dream career. She wanted to be a social worker so that she could help other families. Jasmine was 13 when she was murdered by her mother. She was an exceptionally smart girl who could do anything that she put her mind to. She was kind and shy and had her full life ahead of her.
This is the story of Gilbert Paul Jordan, aka the Boozing Barber. Gilbert was a Canadian born in Vancouver, British Columbia in 1931. At the age of 16, he dropped out of high school and he was a full-blown alcoholic. By 1952, he racked up a lengthy criminal record, including theft, assault, car theft, heroin possession, and cocaine possession. He was obsessed with vodka and having drunken sex. He was drinking up to 50 ounces of vodka per day. 50 ounces is crazy. All his companions were alcoholics. He would look for prostitutes in the slums or in the bars of Vancouver. In 1961, the police pulled Gilbert over and found a 5-year-old girl in his car. He was charged with abduction, but was never convicted. How? The case was thrown out in May of 1961. Shortly after Christmas, drunk-ass Gilbert attempted to jump off the Lionsgate Bridge. Traffic stopped, people got out and tried to help him until he finally gave up and came down. In 1963, Gilbert lured 2 women to his car with an invitation to drink. The women later pressed charges and said Gilbert raped them and stole some of their possessions. He was convicted for theft but acquitted for rape. How is he getting away with this? In 1965, a switchboard operator by the name of Ivy Rose went with Gilbert on one of his drinking binges. The very next day, her naked body was found in a Vancouver hotel with a blood alcohol level of 0.51. The legal driving limit is 0.08, so you can only imagine 0.51. Ivy's death was ruled accidental. A few days after her death, Gilbert applied to change his name to Jordan. He tried to be slick. His charges and convictions continued to mount. In 1969, he was charged twice in one day. In 1971, charged with indecent behavior in public, the charges were dropped. In 1973, convicted of indecent exposure, the charges were dropped. In 1974, indecent assault, he was sentenced to 2 years. Finally! He only served a year, of course, because in 1975 he was out. As soon as he got out, he abducted a woman from a mental institution. He was charged with kidnapping and having sex with a feeble-minded person. He got sentenced to another 2 years. Gilbert became suspicious in October of 1987 when he was drinking with a young lady in a hotel in Vancouver. The police got an anonymous call, and an anonymous caller told the police that Gilbert left the room multiple times to buy more alcohol at 6 a.m. in the morning. Inside the room, they found the body of 27-year-old Vanessa Lee, who was a prostitute. She had a blood alcohol level of 0.91. It was reported that black fluid oozed out of her mouth and her nose. 1 month later, the naked body of Edna Shade turned up in another hotel. Once they seen she passed from alcohol poisoning too, they got the prints from the room, and that led back to Gilbert. He was placed under 24-hour surveillance for 11 days straight. During that time, he took 4 women to different hotels in downtown Vancouver. Each encounter was broke up by the police. They would listen outside the door and hear Gilbert pressuring the women to drink, even offering them money, $10 to finish the cup, $50 to finish the bottle. 2 of the women had a blood alcohol level of 0.43 and 0.52. The police arrested the boozing barber as he was poisoning his last victim. She had lost conscience, and when the police entered the room, Gilbert was lying on top of her, pouring a large bottle of vodka down her throat. Gilbert was linked to 10 deaths, but he was only charged for 7, but only convicted for 1. How? And that was the death of Vanessa Lee. He got 15 years for manslaughter. Filed an appeal, it got reduced to 9. He only served 6. He skated through this whole. He died in 2006, a free man. I'm not even gonna take no shot. He done drunk enough for all of us.
It feels like the start of a horror film. The bodies of 3 young girls and a truck covered in bloody handprints. Please be warned before watching, the details in this case are incredibly disturbing. But let's unravel what the hell happened with this Travis Decker situation, because honestly it's unbelievable. Travis Caleb Decker was a 32-year-old dad of 3, and he'd previously been in the army. He had also been married to his daughter's mother, Whitney Decker, and Whitney, by all accounts, was an absolutely amazing mum to these 3 young girls. They were her absolute world. These were Peyton, aged 9, Evelyn, 8, and Olivia, 5. And everybody said just how adorable and amazing these little girls were. And Whitney really would do absolutely anything she could to try and protect these girls, including ending her marriage. Now, Whitney talked of how she actually ended the marriage with Travis because of his mental instability. She actually documented that as a reason for the divorce. She talked of some really disturbing situations where, like, Travis would just randomly wake up in the middle of the night and scream at her to wake her up. This obviously wasn't just like affecting her marriage with Travis, this was also affecting the little girls, and she just wanted them to have a lovely life. But she was trying to do everything by the book, obviously make sure that Travis did still get to see his little girls, because she said they did have a really good relationship with each other. In September 2024, the pair seemed to kind of be trying to make joint custody work, so that Travis was obviously not the main carer for these girls because of his mental instability, but he was still able to see them as their dad. There seemed to be some kind of agreement in the works or in place where Whitney was trying to ensure that Travis really needed to do anger management, be under a psychiatrist, really kind of cross all of the T's, dot all of the I's. So on Friday the 30th of May at 5 o'clock, Travis was scheduled to pick the girls up to do this court-ordered visitation. Now, he did go and pick the girls up, and he was only supposed to have them for a couple of hours. He was actually registered homeless at this point because he didn't have a home, and he was kind of like randomly staying in hotels and sleeping over in his truck a lot of the time. He was supposed to drop them off at 8 back at their mum's house, but he never did, and so Whitney started to panic massively. She was ringing and ringing him, and it was just going to answer phone, so she ended up showing up at the police station just absolutely distraught. She was in sheer panic mode, as you would be, and she couldn't even show up at Travis's house to get the girls back because, as I said, he didn't have a home. Police immediately started scouring every area they could think of, random motels, random campgrounds, and this was going on for the whole weekend. I can't imagine how it must have been for Whitney. She was constantly posting on Facebook, like trying to find anybody who knew anything. Loads of locals got involved in the search for the girls. They were just looking everywhere, trying to leave no stone unturned. Then, bear in mind, this happened on the Friday night. This was all still going on Monday morning. Like, nobody had heard from the girls all weekend. That must have been absolute horror for the mother. Travis didn't even show up at work on the Monday, so everybody knew something was really seriously wrong. Then on June the 2nd, officers actually found Travis's truck. Now this was incredibly disturbing because on the side of the truck were 2 bloody handprints. Just a short distance from the truck, there were zip ties and plastic bags on the floor. And horrifically, really close by, the bodies of all 3 little girls. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about what happened to the little girls on here because it is just so horrifying, but you can read the affidavit online. You can probably guess from what was found by the truck. It's not human to do that to any human being, let alone your own children. So it goes without saying a massive manhunt was underway at this point because it's like, this guy is clearly incredibly dangerous. He also needs to be brought to justice. And the members of the public were understandably really, really concerned by this. He was apparently very skilled in survival methods, having been in the army. Police spent the entire summer looking absolutely everywhere for Travis. It felt like we couldn't escape the ongoing manhunt for Travis. They had search teams, helicopter teams, dog squads. They were trying to search everywhere. They even ended up in like Mexico looking for him because of some tips that were coming in from members of the public that were trying to be helpful. I believe though they were particularly searching in the Washington Cascades area, and the search actually ended up circling right back to the beginning of where they started. On the 18th of September, human remains were found, a short distance away from where the girls' bodies were found. Police believe these remains are the remains of Travis, and obviously we don't have it confirmed because these things can take a little while to sort of be formally identified. It is an ongoing case. I will keep you guys updated, but hopefully we do have some closure here.
She went from a Playboy model to a prisoner after being convicted of murdering her sugar daddy. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Thomas Burchard. 71-year-old Dr. Thomas Burchard was a renowned child psychologist living in California with his fiancée Judy, who he had been with for 17 years. He was very dedicated and passionate towards his work, and some of his patients' parents would describe him as a miracle worker. He was caring, compassionate, and loved by many. Sometime between 2017 and 2018, Thomas would come across the profile of 25-year-old Kelsey Turner, and he developed an infatuation with her. Kelsey was an aspiring model who once had been on the cover of Playboy Italia. She posted a lot of Playboy-esque photos to her thousands of followers on Instagram who knew her as Bad Barbie. She was also a single mother to at least one child. After her very few modelling gigs, work for Kelsey began to dry up. She wasn't being paid off of Instagram like how she expected, and she started to struggle financially. It was around about this time that she came in contact with Thomas. They began an online friendship/relationship where Kelsey would become dependent and demanding towards Thomas. Kelsey would lay it on thick to him about how much she was struggling and how much help that she needed, and being the generous man that he reality was, Thomas was more than happy to help her. She wasn't actually the only girl that he met online that he would help financially. I think there was like 6 or 7 other girls that he also helped. Thomas would put up Kelsey, her mum, and her child up in a luxurious 4-bedroom home in California, which knocked him back around about $3,000 a month in rent. He bought her a BMW, and he also paid the car insurance on that as well. He would lavish her with expensive gifts, including designer clothes and expensive jewellery, and the more that Thomas was spending on Kelsey, the more that she wanted. She was never satisfied. It was almost as if Thomas's money was burning a hole in her pocket. In exchange for all this, Thomas would get the satisfaction that he was helping a young single mother who he thought was struggling. And I don't know, it's really hard to word. Like, I feel like he thought that they were in some sort of relationship, but not like boyfriend and girlfriend. And he would also get the odd raunchy photo from Kelsey, and he would be able to go and see her and visit her from time to time. I didn't see anywhere reported that he expected anything sexual from Kelsey. Judy, who again is Thomas's fiance, is well aware of what he is doing, and she is pleading with him to stop it and to cut ties with Kelsey. She can see how toxic she is, but no matter how many times Thomas tried, he would keep going back to her. I guess in some sort of way he might have loved Kelsey and he didn't want to let her go, and he knew that she was dependent on him, so he didn't want to let her down. Eventually he did sort of start to understand what Kelsey was doing. She didn't love him, and she was in fact using him. So he told her for not the first or the last time that she was getting cut off. He refused to re-sign another tenancy on the house, which eventually led to Kelsey getting evicted because she wasn't paying the rent, and he took the BMW back off her. She would end up moving to Las Vegas, which is where she was originally from, and she would hound Thomas with manipulative sob stories, telling him that she was on the breadline and that she couldn't eat, and telling him that her child was poorly and she had no money for medication. And just like that, he was back under her thumb because he felt partially responsible for the situation that Kelsey was in. He got her set up in another beautiful, expensive home in Las Vegas, and he even bought her a Mercedes. After he bought her this Mercedes, Kelsey would actually message Judy and said something along the lines of, "Thanks for taking that BMW offers, I look better in the Mercedes anyway," then send the middle finger emoji to her, almost as if she was rubbing it in that she was getting what she wanted from Thomas. What Thomas didn't know is that Kelsey actually got roommates in this house that Thomas was paying for, and she charged these roommates rent, and she would live off of that money alongside the money that Thomas was continually giving her. One of the people living in the house was Kelsey's secret boyfriend, a man named John Kennison. She kept this relationship top secret. There was no way that Thomas could know that she had a boyfriend, because if he did, he would definitely cut her off, and I can imagine this caused some resentment for John, who was known to be a gang member. On the 1st of March 2019, Thomas would unexpectedly turn up at Kelsey's home, and when he arrived, he discovered that John was there. And just as Kelsey suspected, Thomas told her that was it, she was cut off. She began to scream at him and threatened him, and usually this would make Thomas back down, but in this very moment, he wasn't. A few days later, Thomas and Kelsey are out in the car together when Thomas gets lost. He's the one that's driving. Kelsey takes his phone and pretends to use maps, but what she's actually doing is reading through Thomas's text messages. She would come across a conversation between Thomas and her mum, where Thomas was expressing his worry for Kelsey's child or children, because Kelsey was addicted to drugs and alcohol, and Thomas didn't believe that that was a brilliant environment for them to be around. After seeing this, Kelsey absolutely flipped. She felt betrayed by Thomas, who was going behind her back. So while he was driving, she began to kick and to punch him. When they eventually arrived back at the house, Thomas stormed up the stairs into a back bedroom and slammed the door shut. Kelsey gave her boyfriend John the nod, and he would go on to break down the bedroom door and beat 71-year-old Thomas with a baseball bat. He was beaten so severely that his blood was everywhere. Terrified, Thomas begged to be taken to the hospital, and he reassured Kelsey and reassured John that he wouldn't grass on them, he wouldn't say it was them, he would say that he was out walking and someone had mugged him and that's who beat him up. However, they would not take Thomas to the hospital. John would go on to beat Thomas to death, striking him over and over with a baseball bat and even whacking him with a gun. Kelsey and John would stuff Thomas's body into the boot of the Mercedes that Thomas bought Kelsey. They drove it out into the middle of the Nevada desert and then ditched the car. It would be spotted and reported to the police on the 7th of March, and when they discovered the car, they would also discover Thomas's body. He was laid inside the boot, covered in clothes, and the bloody baseball bat was also there. The registration on the car led police to Kelsey, and fingerprints extracted from the bloody baseball bat led them to John. In July 2022, John would plead guilty to second-degree murder and was handed a sentence of 18 to 45 years imprisonment. Kelsey entered an Alford plea and was handed a sentence of 10 to 25 years imprisonment for the murder of Dr. Thomas Burchard.
And this is actually a real question I have. How do you fake your own kidnapping knowing there are people out there really missing whose families are grieving them? How do you fake your own kidnapping? How do you sleep at night knowing that you have taken time and resources away from finding those people just because you were bored and decided to fake your own kidnapping? I don't understand. Sherry Papini lived in a small northern California town with her husband, Keith Papini. Sherry had previously been married, but in 2009, she married Keith. They moved in together, had a baby boy, and 2 years later had their second child, a baby girl. Happy family overall. Sherry was known to be an incredible mom. She adored her kids, and everything was going well for their little family. November 2nd of 2016, it was a Wednesday. Normal day, Keith went to work, the kids went to daycare, and Sherry stayed home as usual. That day, when Keith got home from work, he was a little bit taken aback when he walked into an empty house. It was routine for Sherry to pick up the kids from daycare and for them all to be home at the end of the day to greet Keith from work when he got home. He didn't panic immediately. He figured Sherry and the kids were out running errands, grabbing food, or doing something of sorts, but when Keith couldn't get a hold of Sherry, he figured he would call the daycare and ask what time Sherry picked up the kids, but the daycare staff said, Sherry never picked up the kids. And Sherry Papini was the kind of mom that would drop everything for her kids. Her forgetting to pick up her kids just wasn't really an option. She wouldn't forget. But her not only forgetting to pick them up but not saying a word to her husband or saying anything for anyone for that matter, that was out of character. Something was wrong. Keith called his mom and asked her to pick up the kids so that he could focus on finding Sherry. He opened Find My iPhone to see if he could track the location of her phone, and he did. Her location showed at an intersection about a mile away from their house and close to a trail that she frequently passed through when she was running. Because Sherry had recently picked up running again as a hobby, so he went to the location and Sherry's phone was there, but Sherry wasn't. Her phone was on the ground with her headphones still connected to them and strands of her hair tangled in the headphone wires. Keith sees this and immediately thinks something happened, somebody took her. He calls 911 and reports his wife missing, letting the operator know that she did not pick up the kids from daycare that day, that her phone was found randomly on the ground, and that the strands of hair on the headphone wires signaled to him that there must have been some kind of struggle. Right away from the start, it was all hands on deck to help find Sherry. Local authorities, state authorities, federal authorities, including the FBI, were all involved in the search for Sherry. They conducted close to 20 search warrants, including some outside of California. They searched through cell phone records, bank accounts, email and social media profiles, etc., as well as interviewed family, friends, neighbors, and any and all potential witnesses. Keith Papini was doing what he could on his end of things, continuing to give authorities a sense of urgency to do everything in his power to continue to move the investigation along. He was even doing TV interviews pleading for his wife's safe return home. A GoFundMe page was started that raised thousands of dollars, and an anonymous person came into the picture. They wanted to help Keith find Sherry. They offered $50,000 in exchange for Sherry's safe return, and when that didn't help, they doubled it to $100,000. This anonymous, very wealthy person was willing and wanting to give abductors $100,000 out of the goodness of their heart just to bring Sherry home safely. Sherry Papini went missing November 2nd of 2016, and on November 24th of 2016, Thanksgiving Day, Sherry Papini was found. She was found on a highway around 150 miles away from where she lived between 4 and 5 a.m. when a woman driving noticed Sherry and could visibly tell that she was in severe need of help. Sherry was absolutely covered in injuries, bruises all over her, very clearly unwell, with a panicked look in her eyes and with chains still hanging off of her. One of the injuries that she had included a Bible verse branded on her shoulder, branded like a burn. The woman that found her on the side of the road was startled to see her. She said that she pretty much came out of nowhere, but it was obvious that she was looking for help, which is when that woman called 911. Sherry was taken to the hospital. She had lost a lot of weight and only weighed 87 pounds. The bridge of her nose was broken. Her hair was chopped off. She had deep lacerations on her wrist, ankles, and her waist where she claimed that she had been chained, and she was found with 2 DNA samples on her, 1 male and 1 female. Once Sherry was found and she was safe, she cooperated with police, kind of. Sherry said that she was scared to talk to police because she had been told by her abductors that law enforcement was in on her abductions. More specifically, she was told that a cop was going to buy her. They ended up giving Keith a recorder for him to go in and talk to Sherry and for her to tell him what happened. She said the day of her disappearance, she was running when a car stopped next to her. Sherry claimed 2 Hispanic women were in the car, one holding a weapon. She was instructed to get inside the vehicle with them. Something was placed over her head so she couldn't see where they were taking her. Sherry said the entire 22 days she was missing, she was held in some sort of cell that was dark, cold, and dirty. She said that she was starved and that she suffered a lot, not only emotionally but also physically every single day, hence all the injuries that she had. The day she was able to escape, Sherry claimed that the 2 women who were holding her captive were arguing. One of them took Sherry out of that dark, scary room, put her back in the car with a bag over her head, drove her for a while until they stopped, which is when Sherry got out of the car and booked it. She ran as fast as she could, and that's when she was found. So Sherry Papini's story was everywhere. It was put out there on purpose because, of course, when someone's missing, you want as many people looking for them as possible. But after she was found, it was pretty noticeable that part of the public kind of started questioning the entire thing. Mainly because it didn't make sense to a lot of people why Sherry would be taken, treated horribly for 22 days, and then just released seemingly for no reason at all, just free to go. And then a law enforcement expert with 25 years of experience expressed publicly that he wasn't convinced about Sherry Papini's story either. Mainly because Sherry claimed that her 2 abductors were women, and in his experience, not that it can't happen, but he thought it was highly unlikely that 2 women abducted and held another woman captive for weeks. And then on March 3rd of 2022, so what is that, like 5 years from when she was taken, Sherry Papini was arrested by the FBI on accusations of lying to federal agents and faking her kidnapping to get away from her husband and her children and to go spend time with her ex-boyfriend. Let's explain. Remember the DNA that was found on Sherry Papini when she was found? When they determined that it was male DNA, it was searched for in the criminal database, but there was no match. But then in 2020, with the help of genetic genealogy, they found a match. It was a match to James, an ex-boyfriend of Sherry Papini. Initially, when the police questioned this James, he said that he hadn't spoken to Sherry for years, but eventually he revealed that back in November of 2016, Sherry had asked him for help because, quote, she was trying to get away from her husband, end quote. James said Sherry reached out to him for help in escaping her family, suggested that he rented a car, go pick her up, which is what he did. And then they drove 9 hours back to his place and he hid her in his apartment for the next 3 weeks that she was supposedly missing. He told authorities everything, that all of the injuries that Sherry had were done by herself, to herself. All of the bruises, cuts, and burns were done by Sherry, and occasionally she asked him for help in faking her injuries. Specifically, he explained to investigators how it went down when Sherry asked him to brand her. He said that Sherry had him board up all the windows so she would look really pale and sickly, and she also refused to eat for the same reason. She wanted to look really sickly and like this victim that she so badly wanted to be. With his help, investigators were able to find the 2 prepaid phones that 2 of them had used to communicate with each other to plan this entire thing out, and using James' cell phone data, they confirmed that he did in fact drive the 9 hours that day in 2016 to go and pick up Sherry when she was home all alone. And as even more confirmation, if they even needed it, James' cousin spoke to investigators and confirmed that yes, he did see Sherry Papini at James's house more than one time during the time period where she was supposedly missing. James said that when Thanksgiving came around, Sherry decided that she missed her children and it was time for her to go home. So that's what she did. James's cousin rented a car, drove her back to where she lived, and dropped her off on the side of the highway in the middle of the night. 5 months later in 2020, Keith and Sherry Papini were brought back in for questioning. At the start of the investigation, investigators made sure that everyone in that room understood and was aware that it is illegal to lie to federal agents. And Sherry nodded her head, understanding that it is illegal. They went on to ask Sherry about her abductors. She described the 2 women again. They then showed her photos of her ex-boyfriend's apartment, the exact room that she was hiding out in, and Sherry said, That does look familiar, but that room isn't quite it. Investigators went back to the two abductors and brought up finding them, and Sherry said, you know what? I don't want you to find them because they let me go, and it's because of them that I was able to come home safely. An investigator said, you know what? We aren't gonna find them. We're not gonna find them because they don't exist. We know that you were with your ex-boyfriend hiding out at his house. We know that you did everything to yourself, and we know that this entire thing was a hoax. And Sherry said, no, wrong. It wasn't until Keith, her husband, left the room that Sherry finally started to confess a little bit. Until they had enough to charge her with, Sherry Papini was arrested and charged with making false statements and mail fraud. Listen to this. Prosecutors said that Sherry Papini's hoax kidnapping cost taxpayers more than $300,000 in wasted resources, including money she collected from the California's Victim Compensation Board and Social Security disability income. And that wasn't the only money that Sherry Papini wrongfully used for her benefit. Remember the GoFundMe page that was started for her? That page raised almost $50,000, and that money was used to pay off Cherry's credit cards, Keith's credit cards, and towards personal expenses for the Papini family. In a court hearing, Sherry accepted full responsibility and stated, quote, I am so sorry to the many people who have suffered because of me, the people who sacrificed for the broken woman I was, the people who gave willingly to help me in a time that I so desperately needed help, end quote. She was sentenced to 18 months in prison and ordered to pay over $300,000, part of which will cover the cost of the police investigation. She was released from prison in August of 2023 and placed in a halfway house. I believe that after her release as well, she was to spend 3 years under supervised custody, so she will be under supervised release until late 2026. My phone keeps falling off my window, so sorry if the angle is like literally crazy. I read that Sherry Papini today has a new boyfriend and she's working on writing a book. Keith Papini filed for divorce and received full custody of the children, but I believe that now Sherry does have visitation rights. In regards to the kids, Keith has stated, quote, they are very happy kids. A lot of their childhood years were, in my opinion, stolen from them. So my biggest goal is giving them a happy and healthy life and surrounding them with loving people, end quote. Back to the question that I said at the beginning of the video, how do you fake your own kidnapping and sleep at night? And then like for 3 weeks, just pretend that you were being put in harm's way? Why? There's so many different things that you could do in your life. Why do that? Oh, my phone completely fell off the window and my sticky thing isn't helping. But yeah, that is all I have for today's video. Let me know what you think. Anyway, hope you're having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you. Ooh, up close.